fertility doctor who's made national headlines.
The center of a controversial case.
Used his own sperm on unsuspecting women.
In the summer of 2023, a shocking revelation rocked the medical community and shattered the lives of countless families. Dr. Donald Klein, a once respected fertility specialist, was exposed for committing one of the most unthinkable breaches of trust imaginable. This is a story that delves into the depths of human desperation, medical malpractice, and the devastating consequences of one man's narcissistic actions. Imagine discovering that the doctor you trusted to help you conceive a child had secretly used his own sperm, and you weren't alone. This is the chilling reality for nearly 100 families who fell victim to Dr. Donald Klein, a fertility specialist who played God with their reproductive futures without their knowledge or consent. As we delve deeper into this disturbing case, it's crucial to understand the historical context that allowed such egregious violations to occur. The field of reproductive medicine, while promising hope to countless couples, has long been shrouded in secrecy and ethical ambiguity. In 1884, nearly a century before Dr. Klein opened his clinic, a physician named William Pancoast performed what is considered the first documented case of artificial insemination. The details of this procedure are nothing short of horrifying by today's standards. Dr. Pancoast, treating a wealthy couple struggling with infertility, took matters into his own hands in a way that would be considered criminal today. Without the wife's knowledge or consent, he sedated her with chloroform and injected her with semen from his best-looking medical student. The procedure resulted in a healthy baby, but the deception was maintained. The husband agreed to never reveal the truth to his wife. As we peel back the layers of this disturbing case, it becomes clear that the fertility treatment landscape of the late 20th century was vastly different from what we know today. The absence of modern sperm banks and detailed donor catalogs created an environment ripe for exploitation. Jan Shore, a nurse who worked alongside Dr. Klein from 1981 to 1994, provides a startling glimpse into the clinic's practices. She recalls a small notebook that parents could peruse to select basic donor criteria. The process that followed seems almost comically primitive by today's standards. Shore would personally collect specimens from medical students at the nearby hospital, keeping them warm by transporting them in her bra back to the clinic. But what happened next? This is where the trail goes cold, and the sinister nature of Dr. Klein's actions begins to emerge. Both Shore and Dr. Klein's partner, Dr. Culver, claim ignorance about the fate of these samples once they reach the clinic. Dr. Culver even suggests that the chain of custody for sperm samples could have been easily manipulated, a chilling observation in light of what we now know. The victims, however, paint a far more disturbing picture. One woman, upon discovering that Dr. Klein had used his own sperm to inseminate her, recalled the suspicious nature of her clinic visits. She noted that Dr. Klein was always her sole attending physician and would inexplicably leave the room just before the procedure when she was most vulnerable. Looking back on her experiences, another woman believed that the doctor she trusted had raped her 15 times. She realized with sickening clarity that Klein must have been on an endocrine high while inserting his own sperm into her body. Yet, somehow, this nefarious activity went unnoticed for years. Dr. Culver, Klein's former partner, and Jan, his head nurse, claimed complete ignorance. The clinic's first floor was notably private, with limited staff access, a perfect storm for Klein's deception. But here's where it gets even more twisted. The secrecy Klein maintained mirrored what he expected from his parents. Back then, fertility doctors often advised couples to never tell their children about their conception. Many didn't even keep records, leaving no paper trail. The worry? Potential psychological damage to the kids and murky legal issues over paternity. So the lies continued, even as Klein's offspring came knocking, armed with results from modern DNA technology. But why did he do it? Was it just about ensuring maximum viability in a time-sensitive process? Klein later admitted to inseminating patients within an hour of collecting his own specimen for this very very reason. A woman whose identity remains protected stumbled upon a startling truth that would forever change her life and the lives of countless others. Through the popular DNA testing service 23andMe, she uncovered not only her true biological father, but also a web of siblings she never knew existed. The story begins with this woman's innocent curiosity about her ancestry. However, what she discovered was far more sinister than she could have ever imagined. Her biological father was none other than Dr. Donald Klein, a once respected fertility specialist who had secretly used his own sperm to inseminate his patients. As the woman delved deeper into her newfound family connections, a disturbing pattern emerged. She tracked down 7 half-siblings, all of whom shared striking physical similarities: blonde hair and blue eyes. This revelation sparked intense speculation about Dr. Klein's true motives. Some theorized that he might have been attempting to create a perfect Aryan clan, a chilling notion that harkened back to dark chapters in human history. However, the story of Dr. Klein's deception is far more complex than it initially appears. In August 1963, on a fateful Saturday afternoon, 4-year-old Angela Golden ran into the street chasing after her mother, who was on her way to the store. The scene, forever etched in the memories of extended family members watching from the porch, would change the course of multiple lives. Dr. Donald Klein, driving down that very street, struck and killed young Angela. The incident, captured in yellowed newspaper clippings and tucked away in family albums, resurfaced with the release of the Netflix documentary Our Father. The film brought to light not only Dr. Klein's fertility fraud, but also this tragic accident that allegedly transformed him into a deeply religious man. It's important to note that the details of Angela's death differ from some popular retellings. Contrary to some accounts, Angela was not riding a tricycle when she was struck. More significantly, she was not white, a detail that adds another layer of complexity to Dr. Klein's later actions. In the aftermath of the accident, Dr. Klein displayed what appeared to be genuine remorse. He paid for Angela's funeral and even purchased funeral dresses for her older sisters. The Golden family, despite their immense grief, noted that Klein seemed riddled with remorse. But as we've learned time and time again, human nature is incredibly complex. While Dr. Klein's remorse may have been sincere, it didn't prevent him from later engaging in deeply unethical practices. In fact, following the accident, Klein became one of the most respected elders in his church. He was a man of power, faith, and stature in the community, a man who was revered and trusted implicitly. The religious influence on Dr. Klein's medical practice became increasingly apparent in the years following Angela Golden's tragic death. His staff reported a significant shift in the clinic's atmosphere, with prayer becoming an integral part of daily operations. He'd gather us all together right there in the office, and we'd pray, recalled a former nurse who worked for Dr. Klein in the late 1980s. It wasn't just a quick blessing before lunch. These were full-on prayer sessions, sometimes lasting 15 or 20 minutes. This blending of faith and medicine extended to patient care as well. Many women seeking fertility treatments remember Dr. Klein advising them to pray God's will over their procedures. One patient who wished to remain anonymous shared her experience. "I thought I was there for medical help, but it felt more like a church counseling session at times." Speculation arose about Dr. Klein's possible connection to the Quiverful movement, a Christian sect that views large families as blessings from God. The movement, named after Psalm 127:5, encourages procreation and rejects all forms of birth control. Some of the more extreme proponents of this ideology even view women's wombs as weapons against Satan, a notion that many find unsettling. "Let's not call our wombs weapons against Satan," remarked one former patient dryly. "That's a little intense. You might freak people out if you bring that up at a party." Dr. Klein's office decor seemed to support these theories. Biblical quotes associated with the Quiverful movement adorn the walls, including the movement's namesake verse and Jeremiah 1:5. "Before I formed you in your mother's womb, I knew you." However, closer examination reveals inconsistencies that cast doubt on Dr. Klein's direct involvement with the Quiverful movement. The sect typically opposes all forms of fertility intervention, viewing them as attempts to circumvent God's will. This stance contradicts Dr. Klein's career as a fertility specialist. While speculation about his religious affiliations persisted, it's important important to note that Dr. Klein never publicly confirmed or denied any connection to the Quiverful movement. As one former patient remarked, "I think his motive was far more complex. It seemed like a mix of wanting to create successful pregnancies over and over again through any means necessary. He was obsessed with having the highest success rate at one of the most reputable fertility clinics in the country." Indeed, Dr. Klein's actions appeared to stem from a potent combination of professional ambition, narcissism, and what some described as a God complex. This toxic blend of motivations drove him to cross ethical boundaries that would have far-reaching consequences. The scale of Dr. Klein's deception remained hidden until 2014, though it's believed he was committing these acts from the time he opened his practice in 1979 until at least 1986. Even today, the full extent of the consequences is still being uncovered. The truth began to emerge thanks to Jacoba Ballard, a woman who had always questioned her blonde hair and blue eyes in a family full of dark-haired, brown-eyed relatives. Raised as an only child, Jacoba longed for siblings of her own. Her curiosity led her to take a 23andMe DNA test, which yielded shocking results. The test revealed close relatives, siblings even, far beyond the family she knew. Jacoba began finding these siblings on Facebook, most of whom shared her blonde hair and blue eyes. As the pieces began to fall into place, the siblings started working together, constructing a family tree of potential paternal matches. "We joked that maybe it was the doctor," one sibling recalled. "We had no idea how right we were." Eventually, the siblings noticed they were all matched to a second cousin named Sylvia. She turned out to be the missing link. Dr. Donald Klein was her cousin. Armed with this information, Jacoba found Dr. Klein's son on Facebook. He helped her and her siblings arrange a meeting with the doctor at a restaurant. The encounter was surreal from the start. Dr. Klein arrived with a gun visibly holstered on his hip, a detail that unnerved many present. He proceeded to ask each of his offspring their name, age, and profession. "I felt like we were being ranked," Jacoba later said. Eventually, Dr. Klein admitted to using his own sperm, insisting that all records had been destroyed years ago. He claimed he did it because he felt the mothers were desperate for a child and that he was simply trying to help them. He assured the group that there would be no more than 15 siblings. As this extraordinary conversation unfolded in the crowded restaurant, one could only imagine the reactions of nearby diners. "To have been a fly on the wall for that conversation," one sibling later mused, "though maybe they shouldn't have done it in public. That's super awkward for everyone around them." As the siblings gathered more information, a disturbing pattern emerged. Their mothers had all been told the same lie. The donors were anonymous medical students, used no more than 3 times. But DNA testing confirmed what Jacoba and others had begun to suspect. Dr. Klein had used his own sperm far more extensively than he claimed. The consequences of this deception went beyond emotional trauma. Many half-siblings discovered they shared similar autoimmune and genetic diseases. One sibling revealed, "Some of us have blood clotting disorders. Others have suffered miscarriages or been hospitalized with colon issues. It's like we're uncovering new health concerns with each passing day." Among the many heartbreaking stories, Julie Harmon's account stands out as particularly alarming. Julie's parents were both patients of Dr. Klein. Her mother, eager to conceive, had rushed to the clinic with a vial of her husband's sperm for the insemination procedure. "Mom was so proud," Julie recalled. "She'd bring me to Dr. Klein's office to show me off. They thought they had the baby of their dreams, their own biological child." Years later, while watching the news with her husband, Julie saw Jacoba Ballard discussing the fertility fraud case. Her husband noticed the striking resemblance between Julie and Jacoba. "He asked if I was a product of artificial insemination," Julie said. "I said yes, but insisted it was with my dad's sperm. There was no way I could be related to Jacoba." Despite her certainty, Julie felt uneasy. She called her mother, who repeated what Dr. Klein had told them, that her husband's sperm had been used. But something didn't sit right with Julie. Following her instincts, she decided to take a DNA test. The results were devastating. Dr. Klein had used his own sperm, not her father's. Julie found herself facing the impossible task of breaking this news to the man she had always known as her father. "It felt like my entire identity was gone," Julie shared, her voice trembling. "Everything I thought I knew about myself, my family history, my genetic background, it was all a lie." The emotional toll of these revelations was immense. Julie's father, upon hearing the news, broke down, sobbing. "He has taken everything away from me," he said, his voice filled with anguish. During the restaurant meeting, the siblings confronted Dr. Klein about their various autoimmune health problems. Dr. Klein attempted to reassure them, claiming they had nothing to worry about regarding their health history. However, this assertion was met with skepticism. The Netflix documentary, Our Father, touched on allegations that Dr. Klein himself suffered from rheumatoid arthritis. His former partner in the practice, Dr. Culver, went even further, stating that Klein's sperm wouldn't have passed the stringent requirements of a sperm bank due to his medical history. 30% of sperm bank donations don't make it, Dr. Culver explained. He wouldn't have even been allowed to be a donor. This revelation only fueled the anger and frustration of Dr. Klein's biological children. Jacoba Ballard, determined to seek justice, began reaching out to authorities and media outlets. Initially, her pleas fell on deaf ears. It wasn't until Angela, a local TV reporter from Indianapolis, Fox 59, took an interest that the story began to gain traction. Despite Dr. Klein's efforts to suppress media coverage and protect his marriage and reputation, Angela persisted. Her investigative work eventually led to a criminal investigation as she helped link the doctor to the siblings and uncovered evidence that he had lied to investigators looking into the allegations. In 2017, 4 of Dr. Klein's biological children filed a complaint with Indiana's Attorney General. The doctor's reaction was swift and aggressive. He threatened to sue Fox 59, claiming protection under HIPAA regulations. He also directed his ire at Jacoba, threatening her for contacting the media. "It's a nice way to treat a child who didn't even know she was your child," Jacoba remarked bitterly. When Dr. Klein called Jacoba, her instincts told her to record the conversation. This recording, later aired in the Netflix documentary, provided a chilling glimpse into the doctor's mindset. "The news media is just trying to improve their ratings," Dr. Klein told Jacoba. He went on to plead that if the story came out, it would end his 57-year marriage. "That will really hurt me," he said, seemingly oblivious to the pain he had caused others. Jacoba's response was direct and poignant. "You're asking me to keep my life a secret, and I didn't do anything wrong." In a recorded phone call with Jacoba, he blamed her for going public, saying, "It's your fault for putting it on television for the entire world to see." He showed no remorse for his actions or acknowledgement of the trauma he had caused. Instead, he portrayed himself as the victim, claiming he would be the one hurt by the revelation. As the investigation progressed, Dr. Klein's attempts to silence those involved became increasingly aggressive. Jacoba and her half-siblings faced harassment and intimidation. Jacoba found lug nuts missing from all 4 of her tires. Others received threatening phone calls. One sister's Google Drive was hacked, erasing information about Dr. Klein. A cemetery called another sister, asking when she would buy a plot. The reporter investigating the case was threatened, and Dr. Klein even brought a gun to interviews. Through DNA testing and social media connections, it became clear that most of Dr. Klein's biological children lived within a 25-square-mile area, many just blocks from his home. This raised disturbing questions about whether half-siblings may have unknowingly dated or interacted closely. The half-siblings discovered connections in unexpected ways. Some had children in the same gymnastics classes. One coached another's little league team. In a recorded conversation, Jacoba confronted Dr. Klein about using religion to justify his actions. She later commented to the camera, "When someone isn't religious and you're going to use religious verses to justify your actions, it just gives people more of a reason to be like, right there. That is why I would never be religious because of fucknuts like you." The circle of connections among Dr. Klein's biological children was getting smaller and smaller, which only intensified their paranoia. Many wondered if they had unknowingly dated their half-siblings. Given their close proximity, it seemed highly probable. In another recorded conversation, Dr. Klein attempted to justify his actions using religious rhetoric. He began by saying, "You know, nothing happens without God allowing it." Jacoba calmly responded, questioning why God would permit such actions. Undeterred, Klein quoted scripture condescendingly. "Well, I mentioned that one of my favorite scriptures is Jeremiah 1:5, and if you'll remember, it says, 'Before I formed you in your mother's womb, I knew you.' This This verse became a haunting refrain for the siblings in the documentary. One after another, they repeated it, realizing its implications. The dude knew what he was doing, they concluded. It was clear evidence of Klein's God complex. He was playing God with their lives. Unfortunately, this realization did not translate into legal consequences. There was no law or legal structure to criminalize Klein's actions at the time. Even when 2 paternity tests were filed as evidence in his criminal case, charges failed to materialize. Attorney Ken Winningham explained in an interview with Fox 59 News, "I absolutely think a crime was committed, but the fact that there was no statute or law addressing this type of harm made it really impossible to charge the doctor with a crime." However, the persistent reporter, Angela, uncovered a crucial piece of evidence. She found that Klein had lied to the Attorney General about submitted paperwork years earlier, claiming he had never used his own sample. This discovery, along with Klein's threats to sue Jacoba for libel and slander, finally prompted prosecutor Tim Delaney to launch an investigation. DNA testing confirmed Klein's paternity with a 99.9997% probability. Despite this damning evidence, the only charges brought against him were 2 counts of obstructing justice for inseminating patients with his own semen without their knowledge or consent. At 79 years old, Klein pleaded guilty to While he did lose his medical license, he had already retired by then. In 2019, Indiana passed a criminal statute addressing fertility inseminating patients with his own semen without their knowledge or consent without patient consent. However, this law could not be applied retroactively to Klein's case. In 2022, Klein and Indianapolis Fertility Inc. settled 3 civil cases filed by his donor children for over $1.3 million. 3 additional cases are still pending, continuing to shock the community and Klein's former colleagues. Today, Dr. Klein remains a free man, living a low-profile life in Indianapolis, ironically near several of his biological children. While nearly 100 people may share his DNA, it's doubtful that any of them truly consider him their father.